Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down the Odyssey. As I'm sure you guys know, I'm a massive Christopher Nolan fan, and we've done countless breakdowns of his films on the channel. Naturally, when I heard he was doing the Odyssey, I got really excited because it's one of those stories that has transcended millennia. Thought to be almost 3,000 years old, it's a tale as old as time. Literally. So when Nolan said he was doing the film, naturally I was very hyped, as he's the only person I'd trust to pull off something of this scale. However, the last couple of months have been pretty wild, to say the least. I'm sure you guys have seen the controversy around the movie, and it's been almost inescapable. Whether it's the casting choices, stuff the actors have said, the lack of Grecian people in it, the modern day dialogue, the trailer getting downvoted to oblivion, it's been a constant source of controversy. Now, at the channel, I don't really tend to touch upon that stuff that much, and in my reviews, I try and go in and be as objective as possible for how the film is itself. So, that's what we're going to do in this video. In this video, I want to focus on the movie itself and judge it on its own merits. Now, the Odyssey itself is one of those works that's been adapted time and time again. I actually have the Folio Society book for it, and in case you don't know, these guys are they're basically famous for their artwork and also for putting out whatever was in the first edition. So like the Bond books I have here, they don't have any of the updates that they have in the newer versions, and it's always whatever was first put out. However, with this story being as old as it is, it's not going to be that first telling. The version I've read is the 1996 printing by Robert Fagles, but there's been several adaptations and interpretations over the years. There's also an excellent version read by Ian McKellen on Audible, and each translation and retelling comes with its own alterations. Nolan has said that he's pulled from lots of different sources, but ultimately this feels like his own vision that changes certain aspects of the oral tellings. Now, as always, Nolan doesn't tell things in chronological order, and we have constant spinning plates and things jumping back and forth. We pretty much have three interlocking storylines that gradually collide, and I've tried to structure this video to piece all of them together to explain the movie's plot. So that's how we're going through things, and the first chapter is basically the man, the myth, and the family he left behind. Opening outside Troy, we see Elliot Page's character Sinon, who's been ordered to guard the Trojan horse. Killed by Trojan soldiers, Sinon's final words are, "It's a gift." Now, we learn later in the film that Sinon and Robert Pattinson's characters switch places when being selected for service. Odysseus ended up spotting this trick and decided to look after Sinon. Sinon went on to become a noble warrior, with them carrying around a token from the lottery that Odysseus later uses to taunt Antinous with. But Sinon was essentially sacrificed to make the deception look believable. This is something that later haunts Odysseus, and he takes the character's name when carrying out a similar deception. It kind of establishes the flaws in the character too, because it creates the defining contradiction within him. He's brilliant enough to end a 10-year war, but with this brilliance comes a lot of downsides. In order to achieve what he wants, he must manipulate and sacrifice other people. This idea of deception is laced throughout the film, and beyond the beggar, Odysseus and his gang later disguise themselves as sheep to escape the Cyclops. I think it ultimately plays into how he tricks his opponents and appears a certain way so they lower their gods. Ultimately, we know the Trojan horse isn't a gift, and it's this that allows him to sack Troy. It's a gigantic, vast and incredible scene that shows what Nolan can do at his best. But there's still a feeling that this is a bittersweet victory, as Odysseus is haunted by those whose lives cost victory. Now, the second major part of the storyline comes in Matt Damon basically doing a Jason Bourne and not knowing who he is. Living on a remote island with Calypso, he has no idea about any of his past. He doesn't know where he came from, why there's this grief within him, and also this feeling of violence. I think the stage very much represents him rediscovering who he is and him returning to his quote-unquote home to redefine what that really means. Calypso has basically fallen in love with him, and she gives him lotus flowers which soothe his pain by making him forget. Forgetting is ultimately seductive because remembering means confronting everything he did and everyone he lost. Feel like Calypso gives Odysseus a life outside of who he is and the pressures that come with it. He doesn't have to be a king, husband, father, soldier, or leader. He can simply exist there with her. However, in doing this, the character loses who he is. It's a complete trade-off of his identity, and ultimately, he won't ever find fulfillment by just living in this life where he doesn't feel the cost of anything. Now, the third interlocking storyline takes place at Ithaca, which involves Penelope and his son. Odysseus has been gone for roughly nearly 20 years, and it's about 10 years since he first fought in the Trojan War, with the next 10 being him assumed to be lost at sea. Now in his absence, a large group of suitors have effectively occupied his palace. The poem has a great section about how lavish their lives are now and everything that comes with it. They eat the food, drink the wine, abuse the servants, don't hit the thumbs up, and treat Odysseus' household as though it already belongs to them. To this that we really see Penelope, who's played by Anne Hathaway, and she's under the constant pressure to accept that Odysseus is dead. In doing this, she must choose a new husband, and they will then gain claim to Ithaca. Now that's where Robert Pattinson's character comes into it, and he's basically a perfect villain. He's manipulative, entitled, and though he presents himself as refined enough to be a king, there's just a cruelty within him. He has no qualms about terrorizing Odysseus' son Telemachus inside his own home, and Telemachus is of course played by Tom Holland. Telemachus only knows his dad from the legends, and we see that he's grown up without a father, or daddy as they say. Instead, he's raised by Eumaeus, who's played by John Leguizamo. He's pretty much been a surrogate father, and it's through Telemachus that we get a lot of the information as he travels to learn about Odysseus' past, and basically he acts as a way to connect all the stories. But at the moment, he's a prisoner inside his own home. Now, if you know the story itself, then I'm sure you know the significance of Odysseus' bow and how he's basically the only one capable of stringing it. The sound it makes and the feat he pulls off with it by shooting it through the axes, that sort of becomes his signature, and it's a way to terrify those that stand on the other end. So yeah, those are basically the key things that we need to know before getting to the ending, and we'll discuss the rest of it after a quick word from our sponsors. The Odyssey is of course one of the biggest epics of all time, and history is littered with these kinds of figures, and our sponsors Heroes of History allows you to collect legendary figures from across history and mythology. Heroes of History is a free strategic city building and hero collection game where you grow your own civilization. Take figures like Napoleon, Jane Austen and Spartacus and battle in real life multiplayer events on mobile or browser. Heroes of History has also just launched their Great Odyssey event, which brings Odysseus to the game. If you've only experienced the movie, this will help you learn a lot more about the figure as it takes nods from the epic poem by Homer. Help him take down Scylla in the brand new event dungeon. This is a boss fight with escalating mechanics and some of the hardest endgame content available. Meet new event limited heroes beyond Odysseus like Penelope and Menelaus, and play with some of the most famous figures from history. Log in for 7 days during the event to unlock the limited 5-star hero Odysseus, but you have to be quick because once the event ends, he's gone forever. You can team him up with heroes of history like Leonidas and see what would have happened if he'd been at his side. Heroes of History lets you rewrite history. Join Heroes of History now by using my link in the description and enter my promo code to get a head start on the Great Odyssey. To face Scylla, you'll need a lot of resources as well, so make sure you use my personal link in the description or this QR code to get starter boosters that will give you 10 antimatters, 2000 XP and 20,000 food. You will have to use my specific code, but scan that, use that code, and that will get you all those things. And huge thank you to Heroes of History for sponsoring the video. Now let's get into the rest of the breakdown. Now that takes us to before the war. Here Odysseus is summoned to join the Greek campaign by Agamemnon. Sailing to Troy, they want to retrieve Helen for her husband Menelaus. Odysseus doesn't want to leave Penelope and their young son, but he's bound by duty and politics. He shares a heartfelt goodbye with his wife and tells her that if he does not return, she is allowed to remarry. The way it's presented though, I think it's more Odysseus trying to acknowledge the possibility that war will consume the rest of his life. Penelope then gives him a totem of Athena to carry with him, and this very much represents her love, his connection to his home, the past identity he's leaving behind, and also Athena's protection. The pair also touch upon the possibility of leaving this all behind, which at the time just seems like a fantasy. Instead of kingdoms, wars, responsibilities and gods though, they imagine simply setting off sail together. That fantasy becomes extremely important by the end, and it comes with Odysseus realizing what home really is. Now we then see as Telemachus leaves Ithaca to search about the truth of his father's fate. It leads him to several different characters including John Bernthal's Menelaus. And let me tell you something, Red, he's living well in the Troy. Now, I know when the trailer was shown that people made fun of Lupita for not being the face that launched 1,000 ships, which is how she's described in the book. But this is actually important as time and war have left their marks on the character. They even joke that her face maybe launched 500 ships instead of 1,000, and Helen actually represents the complexities of war, and the realities of them as well. It's clear that she was used as an excuse to go to war, and really what the Greeks wanted was land, money and power. I think it really elevates things quite a lot. As many of us, we often suspect wars are launched with it not being exactly for the reason that the politicians tell us they are. But what's made clear is that this was never really about Helen of Troy, and she was just some bullshit excuse to go to war. War is often romanticized as well, and I think that's what we see with the Trojan horse itself. The men are trapped inside of it for 2 days with no room or air, there's piss and shit everywhere, people drowning in it, people suffocating, and it's far from the romantic image of heroic warfare that this stuff's often sold as. There's also the mental stress as well, as they don't even know if the plan's going to work, but eventually they are taken inside. It's a grand and epic conflict, but Menelaus makes it clear that it's built on misery and human sacrifice. It's quite emotional for Telemachus as well, as this is the closest thing he's actually got to meeting his father. And it complicates the legend. Telemachus and Menelaus sent to archery, and the former clearly sits with the idea that his dad might be dead, so he may have to become the man that Ithaca needs. The film is really complex in tackling the cost of war, as not only does it leave fatherless sons, but the victors also become shadows of their former selves. After the victory as well, Odysseus' men are far from being noble heroes, and they basically do what they want. They think they're this shit, and there's piss and shit everywhere. It's through this, though, that we really get some deconstruction by Eurylochus, who's played by Hamish Patel. Now, though he's loyal to Odysseus, he's not blindly obedient, and he kind of becomes the voice of the crew. To him, Odysseus risks angering the gods, and he feels that he's pushing the men too far in their conquering. This eventually leads him to face down against the Cyclops, which allows Nolan to really dip his tone to horror. There's two major horror sequences in the movie, and Nolan goes next level with both of them. The Cyclops, to me though, kind of represents the terror that these soldiers bring in their almost loop-like behaviour. They arrive somewhere, conquer it, and leave it in ruin, with the people there fearing what they could do next. Now that's basically what the Cyclops represents, and when the cave's blocked by an enormous boulder, the men cannot leave it. The Cyclops then arrives, eats one of the men, goes to sleep, wakes up, and then repeats the process. Now, if you've ever seen Jaws, which it's Jaws, mate, you've seen it, but it kind of reminded me of the speech about the USS Indianapolis. Soldiers were stranded at sea with sharks coming to feast on them throughout the day, which is just so horrifying to think of. It's pretty much that same feeling of terror here, but they can't kill a Cyclops as he's the only one who can move the boulder. So they wait. Eventually, they then use deception once more and manage to get out the cave by disguising as sheep. The men finally reach the shore, and though they're alive and they could simply leave, Odysseus cannot let the humiliation and deaths go unanswered. He then fires an arrow into the Cyclops' eye, which blinds him. Odysseus then justifies it by saying the creature murdered his men, but the crew sees something else. They'd already escaped, and Odysseus did it for revenge rather than for survival. He needed the monster to know that Odysseus had defeated him. This is where his heroism, pride, and obsession with control becomes impossible to separate, and his victory again comes at an unneeded cost. And this is something that continues throughout the film. It's very much a sort of heart of darkness tale where Odysseus encounters things that reflect and challenge him. That's also seen in the giants in armor, whose name I will definitely butcher if I say, so I won't say it. But they completely decimate Odysseus' men, who've assumed themselves to be the most dominant force out there, and suddenly they experience the other side of the conquest. They are slaughtered. This leads to the crew blaming Odysseus, and they connect their suffering to the decision to blind the Cyclops after they had already escaped. They believe Odysseus' arrogance brought divine punishment down upon them. To them, this is no longer simply bad luck. The gods are responding to his pride, which is something he has to grapple with. Upon reaching Circe, many have already considered abandoning him, and Circe plays with them psychologically. Played by Samantha Morton, she's a haunting figure who's in tune with the moon. Seeking refuge with her, it becomes clear that other men have been here too, and all that remains is their armor. Which is something not a bit strange about all this to you, mate. But Circe offers them food, which they welcome due to being starving and exhausted. However, this comes with an addiction. As they chow down on it, they can't get enough, and Circe physically reshapes them, and we get another really strong horror sequence. They turn into pigs, which comments on what the soldiers have become. These are conquerors that are driven by an appetite that they'll never fulfill. They enter foreign homes and consume whatever they can, and this gluttony has now led to their end. Odysseus realizes this when hunting after he kills an animal, and it's revealed to be one of her victims. He then refuses to eat the food and manages to barter his men's forms back. She also has a bird with her that appears to be her sister, and though it doesn't over-explain this, it simply shows that in Circe's world, transformation's a way of life. Directed to the underworld, Odysseus comes across several of the people he encountered before and during the war. Agamemnon is there, and we learn he was murdered by his wife, who just so happened to be the sister of Helen. Having never forgiven him for sacrificing their daughter so he could sail to Troy, he returned as a king but was then killed by her who'd been waiting for him at home. It obviously draws lots of parallels to Odysseus and foreshadows the fact that even managing to get home does not guarantee salvation. Sinon then comes into and basically brings to light the deception Odysseus used there. He was placed there because the Trojans needed to believe that someone had been left behind to present the horse as a gift. Odysseus argues the lie was necessary, but it shows how callous the apparent hero is. Now this is one of the clearest examples of the difference between the legendary version of Odysseus and the actual man. The legend says he devised a brilliant plan that ended the war, but here we see the dead remember who paid for it. Eventually fleeing, they then managed to get away, and at this point, I kind of want to touch upon Athena and her role throughout the movie. In it, Odysseus has conversations with the character that touch upon things like the cost of war, the difference between destiny and choice, and if he really wants to return home. To me, the big thing they grapple with is whether an identity outside of all this war and violence is even possible for the character. Athena is kind of like a divine protector, but in being this, she also kind of wants to protect the man he should be. To me at least. Now a big reveal comes with who's playing Athena, and we do see in the movie that her statue has her head cut off. So we get a constant tease about her identity. Turns out Zendaya actually also plays a part of a random woman who was beheaded because of their brutal conquest. So Athena takes the appearance of this woman because it's symbolic of the constant guilt that he feels. Now in general, the movie treats Greek mythology like a religious horror on an epic scale. The gods are not comforting, and instead they're forces that can reshape nature and destroy human lives. The ocean might be Poseidon, a storm might be Zeus, and a change in the wind might be Athena. The people here cannot separate the natural disasters from divine punishment, and this is what makes the wrath of the gods even more frightening. It's a world where every terrible event might have intention behind it, and ultimately this plays a big part of the film's ending, which we'll talk more about when we get to the end of the video. But next, Odysseus' ship must pass the sirens. The crew seals their ears with wax, and this is so they cannot hear the song, but Odysseus wants to experience it. Now we don't receive a clear, glamorous look at the sirens, but I do like how Nolan keeps them distant. They're fragmented and psychologically threatening, and kind of something off in the distance that could pull you to your doom. The song instantly overwhelms those who hear it as well, and the sirens reach into Odysseus' guilt and force him to question whether he even wants to return home. Returning home means remembering who he is and carrying everything he's done back with him. The sirens very much offer surrender, and he can give up who he is, simply swim to them, surrender all that, and be like the men they bewitch. Part of him wants to stop fighting too, as this will rid him of the guilt and pressures of leadership. They also encounter Scylla. This creature creates a moral choice between going close to that or a giant whirlpool. The idiom between Scylla and Charybdis was created because of this story, and it means to be caught between two equally unpleasant fates. Odysseus once again must choose to sacrifice his men to avoid the ship being destroyed, and it's kind of like the trolley conundrum. I also know people don't like the design of it in the movie, and I did wonder if things were impacted by either Nolan's sensibilities or later retellings of the tale. In Ovid's Metamorphosis, Scylla gets a tragic origin story, and we learn she was once a beautiful nymph whose bathing pool was poisoned by Circe. This then transformed her into a beast, and it added some complexity to the story. But they press on to the sacred cattle of Helios, the sun god. Warned right from the off to subscribe and not eat the cattle, they're well aware that divine punishment will come from not doing either. But the men are exhausted, and when Odysseus isn't watching, they kill and eat the cattle. Now this is the breaking point. Up until now, the crews accused Odysseus of bringing punishment upon them through his choices, but now they knowingly commit the violations themselves. And with this comes the punishment showing that the noble hero's hubris has come too far. A gigantic storm wrecks them, with Odysseus then ending up as the sole survivor. This then takes us to Calypso, where he's lost basically everything. His army, his life back home, and now his sense of identity. However, the Lotus allows him to be a blank slate. But with this, he's also incomplete. Odysseus is a man who can't escape what he's done, and the past begins to resurface. He starts to remember things, and though Calypso offers him a life where he never has to return to responsibility, age, or do anything that comes with a cost. In this though, Odysseus still chooses his mortal family. Now that takes us back to Ithaca, which sees Antinous also realizing that Telemachus is the greatest obstacle when it comes to claiming Penelope. So he sends his men to assassinate him, but Odysseus comes to the rescue. Presenting himself as a stranger, he journeys back, seeing what's happened in his absence and how the home he was so desperate to defend has been left as a shell of itself. Much like him, he was nothing without it, and it's nothing without him. Adopting the identity of Sinan, it's very significant as he's carrying the name of someone he sacrificed in order to return home and restore things. Now throughout we've had Argos, who's Odysseus' dog who he saved when he was a puppy. The dog represents the resilience and passage of time that's passed since its master left. One of Antinous' men is particularly abusive towards it and nearly kills the dog. Antinous then orders the dog to be removed from the palace, dumped in dump, and basically he does this because he understands that Penelope's husband dog and killing that would damage his chances of winning her. It shows how cruel he is as even his restraints calculated. Upon returning, the dog recognizes Odysseus, and even though he's changed, lost weight, grown a beard and disguised himself as a beggar, his old pal knows him immediately. Because he's a bloody good doggo. This becomes the emotional key to Telemachus realizing the truth, and it shows that Odysseus can return to the man he used to be. Odysseus has been transformed by age, grief, violence and this disguise, and though the humans struggle to recognize him, the dog does. And that's because Argos knows that the essential person Odysseus is hasn't changed even though the outer shell has. It answers one of the movie's central questions, which is any part of the man who is left still alive? And Argos doing this shows that the answer is yes. But barely. Like the dog, that old version of Odysseus has survived just long enough to complete the homecoming, and this unites him and Telemachus. With his revelation, they then prepare to destroy the suitors. Using tactical planning once more, they hide all their weapons, armor and shield, and like the horse, sheep, beggar and so on, the deception is on once more. However, this time the deception's happening inside his own walls. So he will allow the suitors to believe he's weak until the moment of escape becomes impossible. We also see how they act with him as well. Zeus's laws of hospitality instruct that beggars and strangers are supposed to be treated with kindness and dignity as they may be gods in disguise. The people themselves that treat them badly also may require the mercy of another house too, and this story has all been about how conquerors have suffered for their actions. Odysseus has seen firsthand how bad karma is and how the tables can be turned. All civilizations depend upon people respecting guests and hosts, and Ithaca must be restored to that as well. The suitors have already violated hospitality by occupying Odysseus' home and consuming his wealth, and now they prove that they also abuse the powerless. They are failing the most basic moral tests without also realizing that the beggar they're humiliating is the king whose home they've stolen. So yeah, that Odysseus appears before Antinous and gives him Sinan's totem to unsettle him. There's also a cruel irony to it because Odysseus played a direct role in Sinan's death. He's then using a relic of the man he sacrificed and his name to psychologically unsettle him. It's a classic manipulation technique by the hero to throw them off their game, and again using an object that could be seen as a gift to tear something down. Speaking with Penelope, he then poses as the beggar once more, and the pair's conversation becomes deeply existential. They discuss the possibility that Odysseus is alive, but Penelope raises a much more painful question. Even if he is alive, would it even be worth it for him to return? Would the man who left 20 years ago still exist? And would it be possible for one person to return to a marriage carrying that much war, death and grief? Now, though Penelope suspects something, it's clear he's not there emotionally yet and is carrying everything he's been through. So Penelope announces that she'll finally remarry. However, she creates a challenge and brings out his bow. Now, the man who wishes to marry her must 1. String the bow, and 2. Fire an arrow through the aligned axes. It's the exact feat established in Act 1, and the suitors then attempt it. No one can do it because this is an object that represents his identity. Odysseus is tied up in this bow, and when it comes to do it, it will be something that seizes not only his wife and his home, but also the man he lost the moment he left. Antinous doesn't even seriously attempt the challenge either, and whether it's out of arrogance, suspicion, or fear of humiliation, he refuses to expose himself as incapable. So the beggar asks for a turn, and though the suitors laugh, he does it all first time. Nothing but net. Even before they can say, there's an arrow through one of the guy's necks, and everyone understands too late that the man they've been insulting is the king they've assumed was dead. The doors are then sealed, their weapons are gone, and Odysseus has them trapped, which becomes a slaughter of the suitors. Even though he's older, injured and outnumbered, he's still Odysseus, and he spent the last 20 years fighting armies, mythological beings, gods, and all the elements. These spoiled men have spent all those years drinking his wine, and it feels like all the violence that Odysseus has carried since Troy finally explodes within him, and he unleashes it on them all. Telemachus also takes down the suitor played by Logan Marshall Green. Throughout, the former has been treated like a weak child, but he bests him even after being nearly killed. In this, he proves that he is capable of protecting Ithaca, and Telemachus is no longer simply Odysseus' son. He's become the future king, which is such a big moment. In the end, though, it boils down to Odysseus and Penelope. Their return is not about pretending nothing's happened, as neither can really change things. They cannot simply return to the way things were. Too much time has passed. Odysseus is no longer the man who left, and Penelope is no longer the woman who waited at the shoreline. Telemachus is no longer the child he left behind either, and the old home is gone, but in this, they can choose something else. Deciding to go off together like they fantasized about at the beginning, they sail away without the obligations that held them. At the time, Odysseus was bound to Agamemnon, and Penelope was responsible for Ithaca. But after 20 years of war, waiting, trauma, and loss, they finally choose the life they really longed for. The dream comes true, but only after almost everything else has been taken from them. In the end, it's not a return to their youth, it's two older, changed people choosing what remains of their future. Telemachus then remains in Ithaca, and he takes the throne and becomes its ruler. This completes his coming-of-age story, as at the beginning, he was living beneath the legend of a father he didn't know. But he believed Odysseus' return might solve everything. By the end, Odysseus does return and helps to destroy the immediate threat, but Telemachus still has to become the man capable of governing after him. Odysseus' journey ends by him leaving the throne behind, whereas Telemachus' journey ends by accepting it. Now on the surface, the Odyssey is about a warrior trying to get home, but the movie keeps complicating the meaning of home. Odysseus spends 20 years believing that Ithaca is a fixed destination waiting for him, but it isn't really. In the time he's gone, Penelope is ruled without him, Telemachus has become a man, his dog has grown old, and his legend has become larger than the truth. So though he can physically return to Ithaca, he cannot return back to the life he left. That is why the ending requires him to leave again, but this time with Penelope. His first departure was forced by obligation, whereas his final departure is a choice. His and Penelope's choice, and it's one that doesn't require manipulation, deceit, or strategy. Throughout, we've seen how he lied to Sinning's character because the strategy required a sacrifice. He blinded the Cyclops after already escaping because the character needed revenge. He repeatedly pushes his men forward because he believes he can control the consequences. Odysseus survives almost everything, but his men do not, so you have to ask whether the cost was even worth it. He has lost not only them, but also himself. Sure, he can outthink monsters, he can survive gods, but he cannot defeat time. All they have now is the future and the time that they have ahead of them. The real victory is accepting that the past is gone, and now they can choose what life remains. That is why Odysseus and Penelope leave together, and that is why Telemachus stays. Odysseus finally stops trying to become the man he was, and he accepts he needs to be the man he needs to become. Telemachus also finally stops waiting for his father to rule in his place, and the old king sails away while the new king takes the throne, and after 20 years, Odysseus' journey home ends with him understanding that home was never only Ithaca, it was also Penelope. Anyway, we have loads of Odyssey inspired shirts at the merch store below, including a full lineup of old Odyssey artwork based on the legend. Beyond that, we've got lots of t-shirts for this year's biggest movies like Obsessions and Backrooms, plus if you pick up more, you get more discounts and save more money. Now, reviewing this movie is a bit weird because there's just so much negativity and also hype around it. Even now, there's people going at each other's throats on Twitter about the quality of the film, and neither group have seen the movie yet. So you have lots of uninformed opinions flying around about stuff, and it's difficult to decipher actual thought from the culture wars. But even me, I have to say, I did have my concerns with this stuff, and yeah, I'll admit, when I saw that trailer with the daddy dialogue and stuff, I was a bit like, I don't know. Everyone knows ancient Greek sounds better in English, Old English, in a British accent. You do not understand that. But yeah, there's been lots of strange things about it, and even the studio recently announcing that they weren't allowing influencers to see it first, and then them definitely seeing it first. That was its whole own thing that just caused lots of noise. And yes, I will die on the hill that influencers did get to see it early, as last week I had lots of makeup artists on Instagram posting about how they just watched the movie, and they do not review films, they're simply just makeup Instagrammers. We also had a lot of the focus on the marketing, not really centered around Odysseus either. I'm not even kidding, mate, I couldn't even tell you shit about how they were approaching Odysseus, as no one really seemed to bring it up in the marketing. Instead, we had lots of stuff with Elliot Page, and then Lupita Nyong'o saying stuff about how she'd like to ask Homer how he felt about the screen time given to women. And she's in the film for like 10 minutes. So yeah, Why don't you ask Nolan as well? But this just created a lot of noise that's distracted from what the actual film is. Sean Chandler said in his review it was just a lot of controversies, and yeah, I think that's the best term to describe them because when you sat there in the cinema, it all strips away. I do think that Nolan really delivered on the promise of creating a grand, soaring, and often operatic tale that's the sort of film that you just don't see anymore. Even something as recent as Moana is filled with CGI backdrops and stuff that is clearly all made on computer. But this is to the other end of the scale, where it's very clear they did as much of it as practically as they could. There's so much effort that they've put into the movie that it's difficult not to get sucked into the vast and epic scale of it. I compare it a lot to Lawrence of Arabia, where you're just blown away by the fact that they actually filmed some of this stuff, and that happens over and over and over. I know the term seed in IMAX is very overused, and when it's stuff like The Mandalorian and Grogu, yeah, I kind of get it. But for this, there's not really any other recommendation you can give. The scope and sheer scale of it's incredible, and I don't know how long it'll be before we get another film like this. Now, I don't think it's perfect, and though it's upper tier Nolan, I still think Inception, Prestige, and The Dark Knight are better films. I think some of the criticisms and worries that people had are very valid as well, and the dialogue at times does feel, I don't know, a bit Nolan-y, even beyond the syntax. It's kind of like when you watch The Dark Knight Rises and Bane is like, "So, you came back to die with your city." And Batman's like, "No, I came here to stop you." And it's like, nah, that could have done with another look over, mate. It's just got the odd bit like that I think really will stand out on multiple watches. Like, I remember watching The Dark Knight Rises in the cinema and thinking it was this incredible film, and then I got the Blu-ray and watched it over and over and over, and I started to quickly see the flaws, so I don't know if maybe I'm going to see more of the issues with this movie, especially the dialogue, if I watch it over and over. Now, on the flip side of that, it's also a film that I actually think I'll enjoy a lot more on a second watch. I think the thing with Nolan movies and their enjoyment for me is sometimes hampered by the non-chronological storytelling. I know that is the character's signature, but yeah, on a first watch when you're trying to get your head around stuff, I don't know, it just makes you feel detached. For example, Batman Begins, really love it now, but the first couple of times I watched it, I found the constant jumping back and forth through time a bit difficult to connect with. There's only once things lined up and went in chronological order that I went with the movie and really started enjoying it. And that's kind of a similar thing here. Everything kind of jumps about at first, which can sort of make it difficult to connect with the movie. I know that's something at home I did in the original work as well, and because of that, when I was first reading it, I did find it difficult to vibe with. But once everything falls into place and starts going in chronological order, it really just soars. The last half hour is absolutely incredible, and Nolan is the god of going out on a high note. I think a lot of his films strive because the endings are often so good that you walk away from the cinema just on a high, and it makes you kind of forget the issues that you had earlier in the movie. I think as well, knowing how things work out and seeing it for a second time, that the issues I had with the jumping about, they're gonna sit a lot better with me. Plus, I'm someone who really loves Nolan's tone when it comes to filmmaking. I know he's criticised for being sterile, but I think that he grounds things really well, and the takes like that with when you're dealing with gods and mythic beasts, it can be hit or miss. Obviously, they need to do stuff like the Cyclops and more supernatural stuff, but they also kind of hold things back in other directions. And actually, have to admit, I think he balances the stuff really well, and it doesn't feel like there's anything missing here, even if, certain more grandiose things are omitted. The fact it all feels real as well just makes stuff like the Cyclops seem even more terrifying than it would if it was just some big CGI monster. Nolan's editing style as well is something I really vibe with too. I'm sure you've seen his movies where they'll have a character talking and they'll mention something and then cut to a shot of that for a couple of seconds. And even like those little shots, that probably would have been like at least half a day's worth of filming. You can tell they just put so much effort in though, and I think if you go in and shut off the noise, it's going to be difficult to not be enamored by this film. Nolan's delivered on his promise to bring us an incredible Odyssey. He's once more showing why he's the best filmmaker in Hollywood right now, and I think his catalogue's unmatched. This is a true tour de force, and Nolan has brought the Odyssey to give us another absolute banger. It's a banger. Anyway, I'd of course love to hear your thoughts on the film below, and I know this is a shortish breakdown compared to what we normally do, but we will be doing several videos on the film, including a big breakdown when it comes out digitally. Please drop a like on this video though in the meantime, leave a comment with all your thoughts below, I'd love to hear them, and if you want to follow us on Instagram and keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure that you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos like this every single week, and if you click the join button you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. Costs just 99 cents a month, it's less than $12 a year, 25 cents a week for one big breakdown at least a week before anyone else, and it makes a massive difference to the channel and means we can just keep putting out these bigger videos and yeah, putting in as much effort as possible. Huge thank you if you do that, we really appreciate it. And if you want something else to watch, guess what, there's another video on screen right now. Go over watch that, mate. Go on, I dare you mate, I dare you, go over there and hit the thumbs up. If you do, you will be granted unlimited wishes, so thank you for doing that, and make sure your first wish is that you can watch this video again. But yeah, this has been a journey for me, and yeah, you take care. Peace.